Visual context: I had my own room and my door was on the wall that was parallel the wall my bed was up against. The door wall was empty cause, me being a little kid, I didn't have many posters or anything to put up. Story: so at first you're probably going to think this was just me as a little kid having bad dreams, but let me assure you that I know I was fully awake and what happened at the end confirms it was real. Also, you should know that my family is Christian and we fully believe in evil spirits and demons and such. When I was little I had this reoccurring experience every night that terrified me so much that I cried and slept in my mom's room every night it happened. This was my first encounter. I was laying in bed trying to go to sleep and all of a sudden I got that feeling of fear in my stomach and I didn't know why. I rolled over and looked around my room. I was surprised by a blue circle of light on my wall next to my door. The light was moving in a circle and making no sound sometimes and a low humming sound other times. This scared me because even being little I knew that it was not normal. But it didn't stop there. After looking at it for a little bit I saw what looked like 4 fingers come out from the bottom of the circle and grab over the circle's edge onto the wall like someone's trying to pull themselves up. Then, a leg hung over the circle's edge. Then I watched as a second hand grabbed higher on the right side of the circle. I knew by now that this had to be a person. Then the person pulled themselves all the way through the wall and was now standing right in front of the circle. It looked like a very tall, skinny man. No, not a man. It was more like the silhouette of a man with no detail able to be made out of him. I remember the sheer horror I felt as I watched him just stand there facing me on the other side of the room. He didn't do anything, just stood there and stared at me. I felt very bad and I started to cry. I buried my head under my blankets and cried and screamed as loud as I could, and then I heard a flick. I felt something grab me. It was my mom. She hugged me tight and I explained everything about the shadow man as I called him, and she didn't know what to make of it. I slept in her room that night. After that night the same occurrence happened 2 or 3 more times in the next week. But the week after was non-stop. Every single night it happened. I was scared to go in my room with the lights off because of it. After the week had gone by, Sunday came. By then my mom was terribly worried and concerned that there was some sort of evil spirit in my room. So on Sunday, after church, my mom had one of our best family friends, who was also the pastor of our church, bless me and pray for the demons and evil spirits to leave me alone. I never saw the shadow man again. I believe there was for whatever reason a demon or evil spirit in my room those nights. I'm so thankful for the pastor and to God for letting me be rid of it. I just hope nothing like this ever happens again to me. Also, I promise this is a true story. I still remember every detail of those nights vividly because of how terrifying it was. The owner of the story says, I was not born alone, there was another spirit with me, and I will explain how I discovered that. I never felt like I belonged to Earth, and I never felt human. I was always anxious about my origin and what my mission on Earth was. This was when I was a child. I no longer think in this way now. I was a very spiritual child, one of those kids who say strange things to their mothers about their past lives. I also always had vivid dreams and a deep interest in them, keeping this information because it would become important. I was also constantly afraid of being watched. I felt anxious that a spirit was observing me when I went to sleep. Over time, I started randomly worrying that a ghost girl was sitting on my bed, watching me, and it seemed somewhat real. I had many nightmares of someone chasing me, especially a dark figure, and when I woke up, I usually ran out of my room. Then, when I was 11 years old, that dark figure grabbed me for the first time. I was forced to look at her face. She was a girl, similar to the one I imagined sitting on my bed. She held me in place and asked me to do something for her, and if I did, she would allow me to go away. I didn't even listen to what she said before agreeing, because I was very scared. She laughed and jumped on me, causing me to wake up, in my first sleep paralysis. I remember looking around with just my eyes, unable to move my body, and I saw the girl lying next to me. After that, I always dreamt of her, not just in dreams. Sometimes, I could only interact with her by closing my eyes, would enter a mental state and she would manipulate my mind. Yes, I know it sounds strange, but that's what happened. If I closed my eyes and imagined her, she would become so vividly real and control herself in my imagination, as if I couldn't control what she did or how she imagined. She often just smiled and frightened me, jumping and grabbing me. It always left me with a strange sensation in my body. Like I was trembling. I also had some out-of-body experiences. One time, I was just sitting and stood up, but instead of standing with my actual body, I stood with my spirit. I turned around and saw myself, then returned back into my body. It was a very scary moment, and there were many people around when it happened, so I had to pretend that nothing happened. That's how I remember it. I was still a child, there could be another explanation. After a few years, my mom contacted a medium to help me with my condition. Honestly, I didn't understand much of what happened in my sessions with the medium, but the girl stopped appearing to me after that. My mom didn't explain everything to me until I grew older. So, she told me that the medium discovered that the girl I interacted with was a spirit from a past life of mine, someone who loved me, and she was still attached to me, unable to move on. She wanted to stay with me, so she would chase me and grab me. This might explain why I was so spiritual and felt detached from the world. There was someone from my past life here, always by my side. This incident happened a few months ago while I worked at a former police department here in the southeastern US. I was a patrol officer there, and our shifts at the time were 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I enjoyed working nights, a lot of fun and crazy things happened which kept things interesting. The night started as it usually does, a shift briefing, pass on, general pre-shift shenanigans. I'd say about the first 3 to 4 hours were pretty normal, wrecks, domestic disturbances and the likes, but I'd say 11:30 to 45 we received a call for a severe wreck. A black sedan rolled over and was upside down in a ditch. The callers who called it never stopped but said they didn't see anyone in or around the vehicle. I was the second on scene, my sergeant being the first. Now, I have been to gruesome scenes, gunshot and stabbing victims, welfare checks to find decomposing bodies, and other homicide/suicide scenes. I was generally okay with handling them, but nothing could have prepared me for this scene. In the car was an infant's child seat ripped from the restraints. My first hope was there wasn't a child in the car. Further investigation, the front windshield wasn't even attached to the car. It happens in a rollover, but about 30 feet away, in the knee-high grass I seen a depression from what looked to be something displacing the grass. As I approached, I saw a mangled leg twisted and contorted, then the body of a woman. 28 years old, based on her driver's license, we recovered. In and out of consciousness and hardly being able to speak. When I found her, fire was rolling on the scene, and I radioed to them. I found a victim. Despite the noise I heard distinctly, "Where is my baby?" When I looked back down on her, she was staring at me. My heart sank. There was a child somewhere in either the vehicle or ejected. I immediately began searching the field after telling my sergeant that a child was also in the vehicle. We searched and eventually. Unfortunately. That was the moment something in me just changed. After the mother and child were transported, we learned the mother succumbed to her wounds. A single car, 2 fatality wreck. I was placed on admin leave and had to speak with our psychiatrist for several days until they deemed it okay for me to return to shift. My first night back was routine calls we usually had, the same as the second night. The third night, we received a call, once again a wreck, on the same road as before, in the same manner. I was closer to the location and arrived on the scene first. Mind racing, heart going 100 miles an hour. The memories flooded back from that first collision, but as I rolled up to the scene, nothing. No wreck, just an empty field and darkness. My blue lights were on, and so were my scene lights. Confused if I was at the right location, I radioed my dispatch to confirm with them, and they acknowledged I was in the right place. I scanned, and nothing was out of the norm. Nothing was disturbed. The ground looked the same as it had. I thought perhaps this was a cruel prank call, maybe an error on the caller, so I got in my patrol car, turned my blue lights off, and prepared to drive further down the road to search. As I placed my car into drive, I noticed movement out of my peripherals, but when I looked, there was just inky darkness. I shook it off and drove off. I never found the second supposed accident and ended up being told to clear up as other calls were waiting, but later that night when things began to calm down, around 3:30 a.m., I decided to drive down that road once again. As I turned left onto the road, I felt as if something nudged my right arm. Instantly, my hair on my arm stood on end, and I got the chills. No one else was in the car with me, but I tried to rationalize it. I continued on down the road. As I approached the original wreck scene, I saw off to the side of the road what appeared to be someone standing in the distance in the field. Despite the distance and being in the shadows of my headlights, I could tell what clothes they were wearing. Blue jeans and a light shirt, but what caught me off guard was I could see the figure holding something in its arms. As I got closer, I slowed down to a crawl, trying to use my spotlight to see better, but when I went to look again, there was nothing there. Something in me told me to stop the car, and I did. As I got out, I looked into the field with my flashlight from the roadside. Behind me and on the other side of the road from the field was a wooded plot of land. From there, I could hear what sounded like footsteps, but lighter. This was late autumn, there was a lot of leaves on the ground, so there should have been more noise if something was walking around on freshly fallen leaves. I informed my dispatch that I was stepping out of my vehicle and where. As I ventured out into the field, I found the original spot where the mother laid, gauze, gloves, and various other medical bandages still laid there intertwined in the long grass. Despite being late autumn, the temperature was sitting around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. But as I approached, I could feel the temperature drop. I got the chills again, goosebumps, and a feeling as if I was being watched. I scanned again, and still nothing. As I left the spot and began walking back to my car, looking down as to not trip as I went, I looked up, and my heart sank. Standing on the driver's side of my car, illuminated ever so faintly but not enough to see a face, was a woman holding clearly a child in her arms. It was clear, the same clothes as before, but just obscured face. I called out to her and continued my way to her, trying to shine my flashlight at her, but as I did, I saw her step back into the shadows. My flashlight seemingly not able to pierce the darkness. As I got to my car, I called out again, searched with my flashlight, even going as far as turning my scene lights on. Nothing. Paranoid, I searched my vehicle, searched the wood line, and the feeling of dread became just too strong, and eventually, I got into my car and left. Shaken up by the experience, I called my sergeant and told him what happened. PTSD, he said, and I was told to take the next several days off and to speak with the counselor. It messed me up. After everything was said and done, I did return to work a week later. I just never went back down that road by myself while employed there. Several other people witnessed the same experience after I left, even people who were never even on scene during the wreck. All described the same woman holding a child, in the field, in the tree line.